Are American Christians supporting Israel because of politics or because they think God will curse them if they don't? Because that's what millions of people believe, literally. So today we're going to dig into one of the most powerful forces in American politics that barely anybody understands. Christian Zionism. So how did a few Bible footnotes change the way that millions of Americans vote, pray, and even push for war? All right, so this is going to be a deep dive. You're about to learn how a mysterious Bible from 1909 rewired modern Christianity and may have changed U.S. foreign policy forever. So let's get right into it. It all starts with a man named Cyrus Scofield, a failed lawyer, shady preacher, and former drunk who somehow became one of the most influential theologians in American history. So in 1909, he published something called the Scofield Reference Bible. So on the surface, it looked like any other King James Bible, but it came with a twist. It came with footnotes, so interpretations, and there were thousands of them. Scofield added his own commentary right there on the same page as the scripture. And these weren't just helpful tips or definitions. These footnotes completely changed how people read the Bible. Scofield introduced a system called dispensationalism. Basically, he divided history into 7 eras, or dispensations, and argued that God had 2 separate plans, one plan for the church and one for Israel. Now, to most readers at this time, this was a new idea, but in Scofield's world, Israel wasn't just a thing of the past. It was the centerpiece of the future. Prophecies in the Old Testament weren't metaphors. They were literal predictions, according to Scofield, and they were coming true in real time. And that's when things got political. One verse Scofield highlighted, Genesis 12-3, became the cornerstone of Christian Zionism. It says, quote, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you." So that sounds nice, right? And that became interpreted as where the you was Israel. As in, if you bless Israel, I'll bless you. If you curse Israel, I'll curse you. And that's because this verse was being spoken to Abraham in the Bible. So Scofield interpreted this as a modern-day command. If you want God to bless America, you better bless Israel. And if you don't, well, good luck. So this idea took off like a wildfire, and not because Scofield forced it, but because it embedded itself inside the faith and infrastructure of millions of people. His Bible became widely popular, especially in Bible colleges, in seminars, and in churches across the South and Midwest America. For many Christians, the Bible wasn't just a spiritual book anymore. It was a political roadmap. Now here's where it gets really intense. So Scofield Bible didn't actually change the scripture. It changed how people read it. And in doing so, it made support for the state of Israel feel like a religious obligation. So that's why you see people like Ted Cruz on Tucker Carlson the other day saying, like, I went to the Senate with wanting to be the main proponent for Israel.
We are commanded to support Israel. And what does that mean?
So it didn't matter what policies Israel had. It didn't matter if they were right or wrong. If they were Israel, they were God's chosen. Now, here's another thing. So there are a bunch of online rumors that say Scofield was secretly funded by Zionist bankers. Yes, the Rothschilds. But there's not a lot of evidence to show that. I mean, believe me, that's juicy. I want it to be the case, but there's not a lot of evidence to show that. So it gets even weirder when you look at who inspired Scofield, this guy named John Nelson Darby. So Darby was the original architect of dispensationalism, and his background is downright chilling. So Darby's family owned something called Leap Castle in Ireland, and it was considered the most haunted castle in the world. There's an estimated 150 dead bodies found in its cellar, and witnesses claimed that satanic rituals were performed right there, and seances were conducted by his relative, Mildred Darby, a Gothic novelist who wrote about a demonic force that she called the Elemental. So while Scofield was promoting this future-centered Israel obsession of his, it wasn't just theology. There might have been a deep, dark spiritual influence behind all this, but that's speculative. Now, think about this. When Scofield released his Bible in 1909, Israel didn't even exist. But just 8 years later, something remarkable happens. The British government issued the Balfour Declaration, a formal statement supporting the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Now, this wasn't just a political move, it was deeply influenced by Christian Zionists inside the British elite, including Lord Arthur Balfour himself, who held dispensationalist beliefs similar to Scofield. Now, even more curious, the letter was addressed to Lord Walter Rothschild. Literally on the figurehead of the letter, it says, "Dear Lord Rothschild." So obviously he's a key figure in the Zionist movement, and this fuels all kinds of conspiracy theories about elite coordination between Zionists, financiers, and Western governments. But this also came during World War I, as Britain was trying to secure influence in the Middle East. While the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, some argue that this declaration was part of a spiritual crusade, part of an imperial chess move, because in the early 1900s, Great Britain was actively looking at the Ottoman Empire's collapse and trying to speculate and divvy up its land proactively, and that's what they ended up doing with the Sykes-Picot Agreement after. So Palestine was seen as a strategic prize militarily and economically, and religiously. Therefore, promoting Christian support for Jewish resettlement aligned with British imperial interests in creating a Western-aligned buffer right there in the region in the Middle East. So many British political and academic elites were sympathetic to the Zionist cause, obviously including Lord Arthur Balfour, the Rothschilds, and members of the Round Table Group. But here's the thing, the support was not always religious. It was often strategic. They saw Jews as a potentially loyal population in a vital region, in an unstable region that just faced a collapse of a multi-hundred-year empire. So they hoped to appeal to the American Protestant support for Zionism as leverage in geopolitics. And they widely published Scofield's Bible and probably saw this as a soft power move, influencing American opinion through theological channels. So the Scofield Reference Bible came out in 1909, Balfour Declaration in 1917. A little bit weird timing. During this gap, Zionism was gaining traction amongst British policymakers and intellectuals, promoting pro-Zionist theological views amongst Americans. And they thought this would help generate grassroots Christian support for Britain's coming actions in Palestine. So here's the question. Could Oxford University Press have political or ideological motivations, not just commercial motivations? I mean, think about it. There's no direct evidence of collusion, but consider this. A British publisher printing a Bible that promotes unconditional support for Jews returning to Palestine at a time when Britain is preparing to take control of Palestine itself. And 8 years before it publicly endorses Zionism through the Balfour Declaration. So that's either one of the most profitable coincidences in publishing history or part of a larger pattern of ideological and imperial alignment. It's almost like prophecy was getting policy backup. Now, this timing right here is just too strange for some researchers to ignore. So, the Scofield Bible predicted that the Jews would return to Palestine in a time when it sounded absolutely absurd. Then, within 1 decade, global superpowers started laying the groundwork to make that a reality. That's why some say the Bible didn't just forecast history, it shaped it. And yes, his entire prophetic framework was built around the idea that the Jews would return to the Holy Land, that a nation of Israel would rise again, that a third temple would be rebuilt. To most people, that seemed absolutely absurd at the time. But after World War II, everything changed. So the Holocaust shocked the entire world, and there was sympathy for the Jewish people, and it exploded. So in 1948, Israel was officially declared a nation, and for evangelicals raised on the Scofield Bible, this wasn't just history, it was prophecy fulfilled. Christian Zionism exploded post-World War II. The generational impact was enormous. Religious education started to shape the U.S. foreign policy. Kids were taught that America had a divine obligation to defend Israel or face divine punishment. So there's a quote from the Bible, it's Hebrew 11:16, and says, "But now they desire a better country that is in heavenly, wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for there hath prepared for them a city." And Revelation 2-9 drops a bombshell that conspiracy theorists definitely latch onto. It says, quote, "I know the slander of those who they say are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, end quote. So passages like that are often interpreted by fringe groups as suggesting that they are imposters within the modern Zionism and fueling suspicions that Christian Zionists are supporting something that they don't fully understand. Now, that's why I don't like leaping to conclusions with these Bible verses, but then came the Cold War and America needed allies in the Middle East, and Israel, a democratic Western-aligned state, fit that bill. So presidents began using terms like Judeo-Christian values, in God we trust, and Israel became more than just a country. It became a symbol of moral clarity in a chaotic world. So by 1967, the 60-day war of Israel's military, they were victorious, and it was being talked about in church pews like it was a miracle. Best-selling books like The Last Great Planet, Earth connected every news headline to biblical prophecy. And suddenly, Christians weren't just interested in Israel, they were obsessed. And by the 1980s, this obsession got political. Televangelists like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson weren't just preaching salvation, they were preaching foreign policy. So groups like the Moral Majority turned pro-Israel theology into a Republican voting bloc. Evangelicals began to see Israel as God's timepiece. Every move the country made was seen as part of the countdown to the second coming. And here's the kicker. This belief system wasn't driven by Jews. It was driven by Christians. Christian Zionists now outnumber Jewish Zionists by tens of millions. And that's why politicians are terrified of them. So they organize massive rallies, pressure lawmakers, and fund trips to Israel for American politicians. Evangelical leaders like Pastor John Hagee say things like, quote, "The day America turns its back on Israel is the day God turns his back on America," end quote. So if you're hearing that every day of your life, starting in Sunday school when you're a little kid, it's going to have an impact on you. So this is why presidential candidates fall over themselves to prove how pro-Israel they are. It's not about Jewish voters, it's about Christian voters. Because here's the math. Evangelicals, they make up about 25 to 30% of the U.S. population. Jews, they just make up 2%. So if you're a politician, in a red state especially, or a swing state district, who are you more worried about upsetting? Exactly. Christian Zionists aren't just part of the Israel lobby. According to some experts, they are the Israel lobby. And their loyalty, it's not to a party, it's to the prophecy. And this is what makes the Christian Zionist movement so powerful and so unique. It's not about logic, it's not even about geopolitics. It's about destiny. They're pursuing something. And that brings us to the uncomfortable part. Christian Zionism is often the supporter of the most hardline Israel policies, things that even many Israeli Jews oppose. They back settlement expansion, they support total Israeli control over Jerusalem, they even oppose peace talks. They believe the end times require conflict in the Holy Land. It's a belief system that's not only political, it's apocalyptic. And here's where things get especially controversial. In their book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy, authors John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt argue that pro-Israel advocacy, especially from Christian Zionism and neoconservatives, played a major role in dragging the U.S. into the Iraq War. Now think about that. Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Faith, Richard Pearl, all were key architects of the war. All had ties to pro-Israel think tanks, and all pushed hard for regime change in Iraq. Even though Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction and no link to 9/11, in 2002, Benjamin Netanyahu testified before Congress saying, quote,
"If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region."
And look at that. Not so much, Bibi. What it did do was destabilize the region, kill hundreds of thousands of people, and fuel a generation of terrorism. And yet, many Christian Zionists supported it because they believed in it. It was part of a divine plan. The same playbook is being used with Iran today. Even when the U.S. intelligence found that Iran had halted its nuclear weapons program, Christian Zionists and groups like AIPAC kept pushing for sanctions, threats, and military action, and now they got their wish. Diplomacy is off the table, and in fact, when Colin Powell suggested talking to Iran back in the day, he was immediately attacked by pro-Israel voices in Washington, Speaking of AIPAC, let's talk about the elephant in the room. AIPAC is one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the country. It spends millions of dollars influencing Congress, shaping policy, and backing candidates. Here's the twist. AIPAC is not registered as a foreign agent. Very strange. So under U.S. law, groups lobbying for foreign governments are supposed to register with the Department of Justice and disclose their activities. AIPAC avoids this by claiming it doesn't officially represent Israel. But behind the scenes, it works closely with the Israeli diplomats, pushes Israeli talking points, and ensures that Congress stays in line with Israeli interests. A former congressional aide once said, "We can count on well over half of the House, like 250 to 300 members, to do reflexively whatever AIPAC wants." Now let that sink in. And yet, because AIPAC is treated as a domestic organization, it escapes transparency and any type of scrutiny. And other foreign lobbies would face strong opposition if they were in this position. But this is how the machine works. Theology becomes politics, politics becomes policy, policy becomes war. And behind it all, a belief system that began with one man, one Bible, and a few well-placed footnotes. So where does this leave us? Well, here's the irony. Many Christian Zionists support Israel not because they love Jews, but because they believe Jews play a role in the end times. So in that vision, Jews rebuild the temple, fight the final war, and, well, eventually convert or perish. To some Jewish critics, that's not support, that's exploitation. Younger evangelicals are starting to question the theology. Some ask whether uncritical support for any nation, no matter what, is really Christian-like. Others point to humanitarian concerns like Palestinian suffering and the ethics of perpetual war, but the legacy of Scofield remains. He didn't change the Bible, he changed how people read it. That's a powerful thing. And in doing so, he helped create one of the most politically influential religious movements in modern American history. No, in modern world history. So next time you wonder why American politicians trip over themselves to back Israel, remember, it's not always about oil or strategy or even democracy or even, rich people. Sometimes it's just because someone read the footnotes. I was completely factual with everything I just said to you. Now, there is a side of this where we could be speculative because there is a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm going to do like a 3 or 4 hour video with Connor about this because we were talking about this a lot. We're going to do a podcast style thing, but I am deeply curious what compelled the Oxford Publishing House to push that and distribute it so hard, and what encouraged American Christian preachers to widely adopt the Scofield Bible and widely interpret it the way that everybody else is interpreting it. Why was it so easy to embed that idea into people? So it's like not too recent of a thing that you planted the seed in people's heads, and look at the monster that became. I don't know, who knows, people might criticize me for making this video saying like, oh, you're saying you're criticizing Jewish things, this and that, whatever. Like, I'm not criticizing Jewish things, I'm criticizing the freaking Christians. People attribute all this power to Jewish people and the Jewish lobby, but I mean, look at what I just said. It's not even necessarily that. It's the 30 million Christians that are just, whatever Israel wants all the time, no matter what. I mean, that's probably going to bring some negative attention to the wrong people. So I think the main takeaway of this video is that Christians might be interpreting this thing. They probably are interpreting this thing wrong the way. So they might have this fundamentally flawed idea of how they should treat Israel. Like Ted Cruz going on Tucker last week and saying like, oh yeah, I got into the Senate because I was just so passionate about being like the biggest proponent of Israel in the U.S. Senate. Like what the hell does that mean, Ted Cruz? How about the freaking cost of living, huh? How about the drug epidemic in America? Like, what does that mean? You entered the Senate to become the biggest proponent of Israel. What the hell does that do for the American citizens? But it's the American citizens' fault because 30% are evangelical Christian and they're just blindly Israel stuff no matter what. So just like I said in last week's video, I wasn't criticizing Israel. I was criticizing their president, Bibi Netanyahu. I think the people of Israel hate Bibi Netanyahu. And in this situation too, it's like anger gets misdirected at the wrong person a lot of the time. So don't make it a Jewish, non-Jewish thing. Make it a blind, devout, brainwashing thing where Christians got a little bit carried away with the whole Israel no matter what thing, because you know you get a crazy president for Israel every once in a while, and he wants to go to war with everybody, and then the Christian bloc backs him, then the Republican bloc backs him, and then everybody's pissed off that we're in war. So it's something to be much more conscious of, especially when we're possibly going to be engaged with something with Iran, unless that starts to de-escalate. So if you want to know more about this topic or these type of topics, I got the Netanyahu video I did last week about why I think he's using foreign policy to evade jail. And then also I have this whole Rothschild series here. I call it The Men Who Broke America. We're probably going to do part 6 pretty soon on that. It's 5 parts so far. And yeah, we started with the origin of central banking with the Rothschilds, got all the way up to the Federal Reserve. And yeah, that same topic gets right into this with the founding and the creation of Israel. So if you like this type of stuff, click on either of these videos. And oh, guys, the VT research group on Circles is absolutely exploding right now. It's like my favorite thing that I'm doing right now, like no lies. So we got a group of like 20-something people, all super curious, interested, research-oriented type of people. We're on the Circles app all day and firing off messages, like giving updates to each other, dropping PDFs, dropping links, dropping videos and everything. So basically, if you want to be ahead of the news, ahead of even X in terms of information, like information that's prevalent to what's going on in the world or what you're interested in, I would highly recommend checking out the VT Research Circle. There's a QR code right here, a link in the description. I'll pin the link in the comment section. And thank you for watching. Much love. Until next time.